You are now listening to Wave a Sound.
Welcome to Versus Mike History. I'm your host, Mike History. In episode 108, Scott joins the podcast to discuss Envy of New York. We get into the origins of the brand and what preceded it, where he draws inspiration when it comes to design, the skillful art of assembling a team, and more. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you choose to listen. Subscribe to our newsletter for brand updates and podcast recommendations, and join our members-only community on Patreon for access to exclusive content. For everything else, go to versusmikehistory.com. Peace, family. Welcome to another episode of Versus Mike History. I'm your host, Mike History. And today we got Scott of Envy of New York in the building. What's going on, brother?
Yes. What's going on, brother? It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, man.
Thank you for coming on the show. So I'm just here to, talk fashion, talk Black designers, talk everything. So I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we're going to go ahead and hop in.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Scott Beale King. I am the creative director and CEO of Envy of New York, which is Envy for short. We've been around since 2018. I got a full team going strong behind me. We're based out of New York, of course, Brooklyn, to be exact. And I'm just happy to be here, man. Real talk.
Word. So I ask everybody who comes on the show, what are you listening to? What's in your rotation? What's spinning right now?
Yeah, it's crazy because I was just looking at my Apple Music's top 10 or top 5 stream artists of the year yesterday.
Yep, it's that time of year.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, I think Larry June is definitely number one for me. Ever since the summer, I've been going crazy with him.
Word.
You got Freddie Gibbs. I think those are like the top 2 for me right now. Then there sprinkles everyone else. I mean, Drake is always there. You know that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Numbers.
Yeah, exactly. A.
All right. So let's talk about the origin of Envy, because you said that the brand's been around since 2018, but I'm sure you've been designing before that. So I want to talk about your early journey as a designer into the birth of Envy.
Oh man, that's a good question. So I think when I first started out with design, I was doing flyers for my student organization. I went to University of Albany, and I was a PR chair, so it was my job to do all the flyers. Like we had bowling night, like fashion show. Like that's when I really started getting into to design for flyers or just like graphic design in general. And then that slowly evolved into, hey, maybe I should try and actually do this with, clothing, because that's something that I actually wanted to do. I always wanted to do fashion. I was always into fashion, but my skills were always self-taught. So it was like a long journey from the beginning.
Okay. And what the experience of designing in school, like what was the reaction that you got from the people who saw your work?
Yeah, my first flyers were terrible. They were trash. I was learning off of YouTube. I was in the library late nights, just trying to put something together that would please people. First few tries, first few drafts were always, can you change this? Can you fix this? The colors aren't really right. The font's terrible. But that just motivated me to get better. The last thing you want to hear is someone tell you that your stuff is trash. So elevation was my goal, and I just dug in, and I just really, really tried to grind and just stay focused with it.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you think, at what point did you start to see some progress and, some development in yourself?
I think it was when I really started paying attention to like those small details. Those are things that always get overlooked, like the colors that you use, different Pantones for things, fonts, selection, typography is something that a lot of people they kind of, take it for granted, but it really can set the tone or the direction for something that you're working on. If it's a flyer or if it's a garment, there's 2 different types of styles that you should be going with.
Definitely. And, as you furthered your journey as a designer, what were some of the things you would use as like inspiration around the world in terms of different art forms?
So growing up, I was always into like hip hop, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Being young, black, and from Brooklyn, I always gravitated towards people like Jay Z, Rockefeller. I was real into like Rockaware. I was wearing that, Sean John. And then like a couple years later, you get Pharrell on the scene. So you start paying attention to Pharrell. He does a whole skateboard thing. Skateboard kind of like opened my eyes. So, okay, there's not just black people and Spanish people who exist in the world. There's also
Mm-hmm.
white people as well. So I started, going across with different cultures, seeing that, and then really when I paid attention to Pharrell and that whole scene, Bape started coming around. And then now I'm starting to pay attention to Japan and like Tokyo, other cities that really have great street culture. And that's when I started really just trying to see how can I incorporate that into my life and why it was just so fascinating to me.
Mm. Um, all right. So before you got to college, was there any dabbling in the arts or at all, or was it just when you got to college?
Yeah, I think around middle school, that's when I really started trying to get into like different types of art. I was real big into drawing.
Mhm.
We had art studio in my middle school. I went to around that time. I was still in Brooklyn, but I was starting to like I went back and forth from Brooklyn to Rockland County, like right outside of like Mount Vernon or the Bronx. Like small county that's like 20 minutes away. Everybody says it's upstate, but yeah, it's right there. But anyways, I really tried my hardest to get into art studio. My artwork wasn't really the best, but there was potential there. And I felt real good about it. But when I asked my art teacher, he was like, it's great. There's a lot of potential, but you're not quite ready to do art studio. There's other things that you're missing in your work. So I think around that time, that's when I really started experimenting with different things. Like I started painting a little bit. I started using pastels, oil pastels, started doing that on canvas, started doing self portraits. So I drew myself, I drew my grandmother. So yeah, I think that's when I started dabbling with different arts, but it still wasn't digital yet. Like that was something that, once I was exposed to that, that kind of blew my mind. But that was closer to maybe senior year of high school.
All right. Well, let's in terms of when you were getting the brand started, right? So got you had all of this inspiration and all of this experience trying different mediums with graphic design, with painting, with drawing. Then you come to the idea in college that you want to apply this to fashion. Talk about the transition from um, wanting to design a garment into wanting to run a business.
Yeah. So for me, I think that business mindset was always something that I kind of, I was always around. A lot of people that I idolized, they were business owners. Even I think my first job, I was at like the age of 7. It was something small, nothing serious. Like I started sweeping hair at a barber shop, making like $5 to $10 a day. I was using that on like, kid stuff, food,
Mhm.
ices, junk food. But that mindset was something that was always solidified in me. Just trying to seek discipline for myself. I think being a business owner, that's something that you have to have. You have to have some type of discipline. And when I was able to kind of sit back and say, what do I want in life? It was not only to run a business, but to put things into the world that last and things that really do resonate with people and, somewhat pull the strings at people's hearts too, pull those chords.
Word. So, when you got started, talk about that process. Like that first, like the startup process. Like, all right, you got your first couple pieces. You putting together your marketing campaigns. Talk about this journey, and were you
Mhm.
alone, or did you start forming that team immediately?
So before we even get into envy, I think I do have to backtrack a little bit because there was
Okay.
a clothing brand that I was a part of before I even started envy in 2018.
Mm,
So around 2015, I was a part of another streetwear brand, a clothing brand by the name of BFBT. That was bright Black Figure, Black Thoughts. And with that one, that's the name. I always laugh at it because it doesn't really roll off the tongue. So it's like, how do you put this into marketing efforts? How do you put garments together that really do tell the story of what we're trying to portray and show people who we're trying to sell to? So that was like a journey. I did that for like a year, year and a half or so, just under 2 years maybe. And that really was like the learning curve for me, where it was like, okay, we can put things on a t-shirt, but it might not sell, it might not go well. And that was like a learning curve that I really did need if I really want to try and start Envy. So, that business, it didn't end well. Me and my partner split ways. He did his thing, I went my route. My route happened to still stay within fashion. And that it took me maybe about 7 to 8 months to kind of really sit back and say, what do I want my brand to be known for? Like, what am I going to represent? What are some of the things I'm going to care for, the values? Like, how am I going to go about doing that? And that's when, Q4 of 2018 came around. It was like right before Q4 started. And that's when I released my first few collections. And around that time, Travis Scott's Afro World was, the thing that was out right then. And I think a lot of those first pieces kind of catered towards what was hot at that moment, like very trendy, like smiley faces, like all over the place. So that was like the starting journey for Envy around that point.
That's excellent. That's very excellent. And I mean, talk about how you felt around this time. Like, how did you feel going into it? Um, I guess solo after splitting.
Yeah, I mean, like even with that trend at that time, it really did match my vibe of who I was because
Mm-hmm.
I was still coming off of a high. My son was born April of that year, so I was like brand new father, like a brand new job that I started earlier that year too. So everything was just kind of moving very fast, but I felt good, and it was the summertime coming up, so I
Mm-hmm.
was outside, but I was outside in dad mode, just enjoying like Brooklyn Bridge Park, just out. But yeah, I think around that time I just felt real good. I was in a good place mentally, physically, and it was just like you couldn't tell me anything. Like I'm gonna put this out. I'm gonna win the hearts of everyone with this first drop, and it had a lot of good reaction. So it really did put me in a position to kind of say, okay, I can take this up a notch, and people actually do care what I put into the world.
And how did you like? How did your circle? How did your people react to you getting hopping into this brand again after you know, splitting from the last situation?
Yeah, so um, I'll never forget my cousin, one of my cousins that I grew up with. The first thing he said to me was, "It's about time you actually started putting some stuff out that I can actually wear."
Mhm.
Because with with the last clothing brand, the things were a little bit darker.
Mhm.
But with Envy, despite the name, of course, with Envy, it's a little bit more. We try to do pieces that really do bring people back to a certain time in their lives. Like especially being that most of the team is millennial, so we're talking. Those early pieces were like early 2000 All Stars from the NBA teams, like AI, Tracy McGrady, T Mac, Kobe. So that was one of our first teas that really did sell very well. I think we did maybe about just like 50 to 60 units of that shirt alone. And at this point it's just me. I don't have a team. So like around that time, that was some of the first initial feedback that I did get. It's about time you started putting things out that people actually care to see.
Sounds good. All right. Well, let's get into building this team. You know, um, it is clearly, I mean, nothing short of impossible to do everything yourself when it comes to running a fashion brand. So you obviously have to, accumulate talent to surround yourself with in order to make the dream come true. And you have to, um, you know, surround yourself with people who are gonna see the vision that you set out for the brand.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I want you to talk about how you go about that process? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to build a team. I'll say that, and it's not easy to lead a team either. So I think in my 9 to 5, I do hiring for a living. So I'm a
Okay.
talent acquisition or a recruiter. So with that, there are certain things that I look for in a person, and just me knowing who I am at this point in life, I'm knocking at the door at 30. Like I'm like 4 months away from turning 30. So at this point, I don't really think my personality is changing too drastically. So I really need people around me who can balance me out or challenge me when that time calls for. And those are some of the things that I look for. Those qualities I look for that in my team. Every single person on my team has a role, and when I started out, it was just me for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and then I brought on a close friend of mine who I see as a brother to this day, and he's still on the team. His name is Ivan, actually. So he was the first person on the team, and I worked with him for before I started doing recruiting. I worked in sales as a sales development rep, and then I got promoted to account executive. But the entire time I was working with him at this startup, so I began to see his work ethic, and I knew
Mm,
he was serious. He took things serious. Even if he had his own process, the results were always, they were always stellar. He was always, given good grace by any manager that we came in contact with. So that was the first person who joined the team. I invited him in, and I think back to that time with him, and we were on a train heading back to Brooklyn from the city after work, and it was always just me venting to him, telling him like what my vision was for Envy or just a clothing brand in general. Because at that time I was still with the first clothing brand, and that was like an awkward phase for me, just trying to figure out what was next for me because I didn't want to give up on fashion. So, I owe a lot of credit to him when it comes to just getting my mind right into the next phase of what was for me at that time. But yeah, I mean, there was him, and then I think like after that was Mango, who started off just a model. Reeled him in, and then after that, we just really sought out to find 4 other people who could really try and execute the marketing and the campaigns the best ability that we could put into the world.
all right. Um, so what category would you say the brand falls under? Would you say it's like a lifestyle brand, a streetwear brand, cut and sew,
Hmm.
ready to
Yeah,
wear?
yeah, definitely streetwear. But we do, I would say, streetwear lifestyle because there's like a whole other side of envy outside of just the clothing.
Okay.
We want to stand for something, we want to represent something, and that lifestyle aspect allows us to do that. Whether it's just just trying to uplift our community, give
Mhm.
back to our community, or just create safe places. Like we outside of Envy of New York, we do have like a whole separate side, and that one is called Black Visionary Semi-Social Club. That was a
Okay.
play on, of course, anti-social social club, but we want to create our own version of that. Really, just create a safe space where it's for creatives, of course, but also just dreamers. That's our slogan: design for dreamers and creatives alike. So, with that in mind, that Black Visionary Semi-Social Club, that side really was something where we wanted to create a piece or a garment. It just started off as a T-shirt, and when we had that T-shirt, it was something where it felt like we were giving a little bit of us to our community and saying, we see you, we hear you. And it was during a time where this was like right before the riots, and when the riots all started, like when the pandemic hit, because of George Floyd, we really did tap into that community even more, and we felt the love come back. I think a lot of Black-owned businesses did as well.
Mhm.
There was a surge in support for Black-owned businesses, but that was during a time where we really want to figure out new ways we could give back and figure out new and exciting ways that we can reel the community in and feel as though we were somewhat like a neighbor to our customers, our supporter, because that's what a neighborhood is. So I think we did like a support your neighborhood campaign where we did donations to Black single mothers that were in need,
Amazing.
and there was just a few other campaigns or a few other donations that we started around that time that I'm hoping that we can still continue into the future.
That's excellent. Good to hear. Um,
Thanks.
so what I wanted to know is, um, you brought up the pandemic. I wanted to know, how did that time period affect the growth of your brand, and how did you make your way through it?
That was rough. We
Mhm.
usually do like a small Black History Month, like capsule, and I'll never forget. We did like a small one. It was like two T-shirts and I think a hat. We did that in February of 2020. I'm pretty sure that's when COVID first like hit nationally at least.
It was
So
rumblings. Yeah, it was definitely rumblings. Like,
yeah, yeah, like we had dropped it right around February. I think it was like mid to late February, and then like 2, 3 weeks later, New York City shut down. Like even with that capsule, it was hard for us to get those shirts done because the print shops
mhm.
weren't really open the same way,
Oh man, yeah.
and like and we felt it too because when I put that out, I remember looking back at the analytics for the website, and it was like we had like three sales and we made like a batch like 30, 40 t-shirts, and we're just like, what's going on, you know?
Mhm.
And then, I watched the news and it's just like, this is making sense. Like at the
Mm,
time my job wasn't really in question, so I didn't really feel what everyone else was going through.
mhm.
But weeks later, I'm starting to see people get let go left and right, and a lot of people are unsure of what the future is. And I started to actually like open my eyes and look around, and it's like, whoa, like what's next for us? Like what's going to happen? We've never lived through this before, so I didn't. A lot of us, including probably yourself, were like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, that was a very wild time.
Yeah,
I was,
definitely.
I remember recording a podcast episode, like reading about Rudy Gobert touching mics.
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
Man,
man. And the reality hit in.
yeah,
Everything just came tumbling down, man.
yeah, it got very real right after that.
Exactly, exactly. And I
um,
think for us, I forgot to miss like for us. I know you asked like what were the challenges. So
mhm,
like even like supply chain issues,
mhm.
shipping, like even to this day, the inflation is something we're still battling. Like the still remnants of
Oh
COVID that
yeah,
are still everlasting, and it's just I don't know. I'm tired
tell
of it.
me
I'm
about
tired. I'm ready for them to get the hell out of here with this COVID stuff. But
it.
we got to deal with it. We
Mhm.
making it happen.
Yeah, and that's what's up. That's what it's about.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of that, that's actually a great segue, because I want to know, do you think that, like, the space is of it, do you think there's more space available for Black designers today, or do you think that, like, there's still, like, the outliers that shoot all the way up to the top and don't really leave any resources for the rest?
So when it comes to that, there's always space for people to come in. It just comes down to, you know, how open everyone is to letting them in. Because at the end of the day, the public, the general public, has the most power in those situations, especially if you're just like a small independent clothing brand that's seeking to emerge. Like similar to us at Envy, we're small. It's not like we had big capital ventures or any like big investors helping us out. Like everything is self-funded. So it's all about like the people around you supporting you, pushing you, just making sure as a Black owned business, you're doing something that really does tie into the community or tie into the people that you're seeking to, market yourself to. So a lot of it is on the Black owned business, or a lot of it is on the small owned business in general. But even outside of that, there are certain variables or certain factors you do have to think about when you start a business, and that's resources, funding, just how you're going to go about doing certain things in a market that is probably most likely oversaturated.
Mm.
So those are just all things you just have to overcome. You got to set yourself apart.
um and I guess I'm curious to know, what do you see for the future of the brand, like the next 5 years, in terms of expansion? How do you see yourself expanding the product and the lifestyle end of the brand?
So the ultimate goal, like a lot of people don't know this, but Envy of New York is actually underneath LLC by the name of Envy Studios.
Okay.
So at the end of the 5 years, or hopefully sooner than that, we would have some type of like in-house agency or in-house one-stop shop to provide support or resources to other small owned or up and coming businesses that are seeking to, grow their own brand or grow their own business in general. So that could be graphic design, that could be marketing services, that could be print services, consultations for how to do certain things. A lot of people aren't aware of like how to source manufacturers, especially out of country manufacturers. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a service that I want to provide other businesses, and it doesn't have to be clothing. I have a good friend right now. It's actually the godfather of my son who's starting a restaurant, and just helping him secure certain things for his restaurant or his storefront. It could be like signs, decals, mugs, like custom mugs. All
Mm-hmm.
things that could be done in the U.S. or certain things that could be outsourced out of the country and brought back in.
That's
So yeah,
that's
that's
excellent.
yeah, thanks, man.
Very good. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all I got. You know,
Okay.
almost, so we're going into 2023. This is gonna be year 5 for Envy.
Yep.
Um,
Yes.
what are we looking forward to?
Man, we're trying to get more active with the events. We just had like 2 events or collab with different organizations for 2 different events. One was like a canned food drive, but it was like a party and you can still bring donations. That was real cool. We did that with Lips Cafe and the after dinner party series. So just collabing with more people within the community, building those type of things out. And even besides that, we're going to approach the way we release merchandise a little bit differently, really just upping the scale, expectations. We've kind of hit like a plateau, not really a plateau with how we marketed things, but the way social media is going, like, you have to do more video stuff. We've done a
Yeah.
lot of photography kind of stuff, still images. So now we want to get more into like the visuals, like really telling people or showing people the stories with these campaigns and bringing those campaigns to life.
Well, sounds good. I actually did have another question for you.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
but
I saw that you guys were moving around a lot this summer.
yeah,
You
yeah,
guys went to a lot of pop-ups, Atlanta,
yep.
and a bunch of different other places. I wanted to ask you about that experience and connecting with other people in different cities and things of that nature.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Definitely eye opening for me because you get so used to being in New York, it's somewhat like a bubble, and you interact with the same people or just similar people who are connected to everyone else. So going down to ATL was like an entirely new market. Met a whole bunch of new people. Some people that were connected that I didn't even know would be at those events. We did Atlanta Streetwear Market, and that spot itself just opened my eyes because it was like it's an entirely other market that we should be tapping into. And if we're able to get outside of our New York bubble, then sky's is the limit. I'm thinking even envy of LA. That's something that's kind of been on my mind. You asked about the 5-year thing earlier, so like not just having envy of New York, but a whole other coast that could buy into what we're pitching, the story that we want to sell.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
It all sounds good. All right, my brother. It has been a pleasure having you on this podcast today.
Yes.
It's been a really great conversation, really eye-opening into your personal experience with your brand. And I guess I'm leaving the floor open to you to say any last messages and plug in your social media. Where can people find you online?
Definitely, brother. Man, I appreciate you for having me for real, man. So you can find us at Envy of NY on Instagram. We have the website, similar name. Envyofny.com is just like literally NY spelled out. Or if you type in Envy of New York, it'll pop up on Google too. So you can see us there. And I always say before I get out of here, just hold your people close to you. It's a crazy time, crazy world that we live in. And if we're doing this business thing, you got to take care of the people that's around you because they're the ones that's going to help lift you up and see your dreams come true. And you can't take that for granted. That's all I got to say, man. Much love.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Definitely.
you know, you guys, you know where to find everything versusmikehistory.com. Make sure you're subscribing to the newsletter. And I'll see you at the next episode. Peace.
Love. Peace. Peace.